All right, welcome everybody. I'm excited to welcome my guest for today. Patricia Young is a highly sensitive therapist, coach, and podcaster. She teaches an online course to help HSPs discover their superpowers and create meaningful and authentic connections. Patricia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, John. Thanks. How about yourself?
I'm all right. Thank you for your patience and flexibility and willingness to humor me with some new technology and a
Totally
last minute
get it.
decision to stream this on YouTube. I appreciate that a lot.
No
Um,
worries.
well, I'm excited to have you, and maybe you can just expand a little bit first on your intro. We gave kind of the official intro, but what else should people know about you, and also what's going on in your world right now?
Well, I guess I'm curious if your listeners know about what a highly sensitive person is, because that's kind of an
To be a
important
good
thing.
place to start.
The informal definition, Dr. Elaine Aron researched the trait back in the 90s. It's how we come wired. We're born this way. They've discovered the trait in over 100 animal species. If you've been told you're too sensitive, you're too dramatic, you're too intense, you can't take a joke, you think too much, you worry too much, you might be a highly sensitive person.
I've probably gotten a few of those.
Yeah, yeah. But
So
we're
what
deep thinkers.
percentage? Yeah,
Go
go ahead.
ahead.
What
I was
percentage
gonna
of
say,
therapists do you think are highly sensitive people?
I have a sense of a pretty fair amount. 50% of clients in therapy are HSPs. The 2 most common Myers-Briggs are INFJ and INFP for HSPs. That doesn't mean you're an HSP.
Hmm.
We're loyal, we're conscientious, we are deep thinkers, we process things, we see things that other things don't, we come up with solutions that other people don't, we're highly empathic. Yeah.
Mm. So it's interesting, right? Because there is it's a bit of a prerequisite as a therapist to be sensitive, or at least to be able to attune to one's own feelings and the feelings of clients, right?
You would
And
hope
to
so.
use you would hope so, yeah. Geez, you're right about that. The good the effective therapists have to be sensitive enough to get the job done, right?
A
Um,
and to be
yeah,
willing to do our own work,
yeah,
to rumble with our own stuff that I think those of us that have wounding are really great at helping clients in their lives, but some of us don't do our own work, and when it comes to
yeah,
conflict or things to work out in our own lives, we don't know how to do that, and that impacts our role as therapists.
yeah, for sure. So, it's interesting. How did you get started in with this particular interest?
There is nothing in my life, John, that is very linear. I thought I was an introvert. I thought I had social anxiety, and I don't even remember who told me about the trait of high sensitivity. And when I read about it, everything just fell into place. And I had really already adjusted my practice. I Part of being a highly sensitive person is we're very in tune with ourselves and really understand. So I'd already adjusted my therapy practice in most ways to adapt to highly sensitive people without knowing what it was. And then learning about the trade, it's like, boom, this is what I want to do. This is what I want my podcast to be about. And everything just kind of fell into place.
Mhm. So I could assume some of the, um, I suppose the side effects of being a highly sensitive person, but maybe it's maybe we're more concerned with the superpowers as you put it in your your kind of bio. What are a few of the superpowers that you see?
We're incredibly creative. We see solutions to things that other people don't. We're able to attune to other people. We notice things that others don't. We're the justice makers. We're the healers. We have amazing strengths. The downside is we tend to get overwhelmed and over aroused very easily. And Ariana Smith uses this analogy that our bathtubs fill up very quickly. And when we pull the drain, they drain very slowly. And because our bathtubs are so full, there's not a lot of room to slosh around.
That's quite the image.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I credit her because it's just a beautiful analogy.
Mm, nice. Well, I reached out to you in part because I read your Facebook post just a number of weeks ago, and it sparked a healthy dose of comments from from people, mostly therapists. And this show is for therapists. We primarily talk about the business of mental health, uh, building and growing a private practice. And you said some really interesting things that stood out to me. Do you mind if I bring up a couple of those things?
Please.
Cool. I mean, one thing that you brought up was right off the bat, like a reason you prefer coaching to therapy is the ability to show up freely as a human you said to show up freely as a human who cares for my clients and to interact relationally with them without fear. We could talk for an hour just about, unpacking that in itself, right? But say more about that and the evolution for you from therapist to coach and how that has enabled you to operate more freely.
Yeah. I want to be really clear that when we as therapists or coaches decide that we want to have a more relational type of therapy, I'm still very boundaried. I'm still very ethical. I do a lot of
Mhm.
self-disclosure, but it's very intentional. So I want to be very clear that when I say I feel very constricted by the rules of therapy and all of the rules, we really lose the human being in that. And you have to be a seasoned therapist to understand yourself and why you're doing what you're doing. So uh, go ahead. You want to say something?
No, keep going.
So I love being able to, especially with highly sensitive people, and if your listeners are therapists, half of your clients are highly sensitive people. We tend to run on the anxious side. We worry. If you don't know that those are your clients and you're trying to get them to be less anxious or not think as much, you're creating more wounding in your clients. And because of my own personal wounding, learning about being a highly sensitive person, getting all of those messages, I use self disclosure a lot. And I always get consent from clients. First, hey, I want to share something with you. Then I want to see how it lands with you. And my clients tell me that it's so validating to have somebody say, I get it. If I'm going through something that's similar to what the client is, I will share that. And it's so normalizing and validating. And we are having, I mean, I think how we make powerful change in therapy is with the relationships that we have with our clients. And if you look through an attachment lens, that means being solid, secure, and modeling secure relationships.
Mhm. Yeah. So, is it that these days you do both coaching and therapy with people, or how do you kind of
I
parse
really
out your
only wanna do
services?
coaching. That's really what my preference is. I started out doing in-home therapy. I have a Medicare client left. I do have people that contact me, and because of needing to have a write-off for insurance, I will do therapy because I understand that people need to use it. My preference is coaching just because it gives me more room, and I'll tell you that I still tend to default to the most conservative form of coaching just because I'm a rule follower. I can use Zoom for my coaching stuff. I use a HIPAA compliant platform because
Mhm.
that's, I still tend to default to what is more conservative.
Mhm. And if a client is, let's say a client reaches out to you and they're like, I don't know what I need, right? Whether it's coaching or therapy, or maybe I'm right down the middle. How do you explain the difference between the two, and how do you help them decide?
I have a messy definition. I really haven't been able to come up with something. The traditional thing is therapy is about the past and coaching is about the present. If you're
Mhm.
highly sensitive, we have to go back and look at where the wounding came from. For me, an ideal coaching client is basically someone like myself. I'm wounded. I still have issues that come up. I'm functioning well enough. I'm not going to be hospitalized. I'm not suicidal.
Mhm.
And I want to move forward. I want to dig in and look at what's going on. And I love being able to give insights with clients and see if we can't move them forward. And if you need to be where you're at, that's fine. I don't have a need for you to make progress and move forward, but I just feel like it gives me the freedom to be authentic and to really step in there.
Mhm. Can you remember the first moment where, I guess you felt that opportunity to be as authentic as you wanna be, or, maybe when you really felt the benefit of, a true kind of coaching relationship versus a therapy relationship?
No, but but what I can offer you, I feel like I never have the right answer.
That's all right.
In my podcast, I do bonus episodes, and they're almost always about things that I'm struggling with personally. I have a really strong value about wanting to model that it's okay to struggle, it's okay to rumble with things. And I want people to see that you can be functioning well enough and still struggle with things. And I think when I see these things about do these 5 things so you're not anxious, do these things so you're not depressed, I think that's a tremendous disservice. If you are alive and human, you will struggle with things. That is the nature of being human. Will you have joy? Will you have, an ease in your life? Of course. And will you struggle with things? Absolutely. And I don't think we talk enough about the struggle and model the struggle.
Got it, okay. So part of it is just being able to infuse even more of kind of your own story or your own authenticity, whereas the traditional model or some of the roots of of psychotherapy are around therapists being in position of power. That power is often abused, unfortunately.
Yep.
That power is often felt, right, even from the first session of there's this therapist who's buttoned up or clearly must have their life together, or knows more than me and is probably more uh, emotionally intelligent than me or whatever it is, right? My therapist doesn't have problems is a big assumption. And they're in this position where um, I know a tremendous amount about my client, but my client knows very little about me. So that
Right, and
dynamic, yes,
that does not work
fundamentally.
for me, and I spent
Hmm.
years in therapy, John, and I still struggled, and I kept wondering, "What is wrong with me? How come I'm not getting it?" My therapist just would have said, "You're gonna continue to struggle. You'll struggle less, you'll have more tools, and that's a normal thing." I just kept thinking, "What is wrong with me that I continue to struggle?"
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. So it must have been quite liberating to discover that maybe it's not me, maybe it's the model.
Absolutely, absolutely, and what clients say is they just appreciate the transparency. I also run groups, and I often will model. I mean, I had a group a couple weeks ago, and it's like I'm having imposter syndrome. I know what I'm doing, but I'm having this thing like I don't know what I'm doing. People are like, "Wow, you shared that?" Yeah, it gives people permission to show up authentically. They know how deep they can go. We're not playing I'm fine, I'm fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, what a time in history right now to not be fine, or for for most of us to not be fine in one way or another or many ways, right? So I'm wondering what things have been like for you the past 12 months, and also what do you see among therapists in terms of the things that we're helping clients through, or just the added level of pressure for therapists. There's great demand for therapy right now. There's a lot of burnout that's kind of right under the surface for many of us, or maybe taking some therapists over the edge. Like, how do you see that all going?
I think it's really been an opportunity for therapists to join with their clients in an appropriate way. I mean, it's been a brutal year for all of us, for therapists, for clients. And I had clients that would say, "This is what I'm struggling with." And I'd be like, "Yeah, I get it. I'm right there with you."
Mhm.
Not in a way to have them feel powerless, but to say, "We haven't ever been here before. We're both in new territory. And how can I support you in finding out?" I have a client who's been struggling for a year because there are no resources, and it's been really difficult to feel so powerless. We talk about that. We're basically helping with survival skills because there is not a way out right now, and it means having to take care of ourselves, and I've been incredibly depleted the last couple weeks, and I'd taken a
Mhm.
vacation in a couple weeks because this is hard. It's hard stuff for all of us, but we can name
Mhm.
it in session. I mean, I don't go to session and say, "Let me tell you about how hard COVID is on me." I don't do that. The client brings it up, I will mirror and validate that.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so obviously the dance or the balance is to mirror and validate that without making it about you, right? It's even a piece why a lot of new counselors are taught to either not self-disclose or to do it very, very judiciously, right? Because sometimes then the tables turn to the client being worried about you or focus on you, or hey, well,
Right,
now I feel bad for struggling, given that you're struggling too, or maybe you're struggling worse. And
right.
yeah.
And I make it really clear that I'm good with what's going on, I don't need to be cared for, and if a client says like, uh, many of the ways that I create safety is at the beginning when you say, "How are you doing?" and the client asks you, if I'm tired, I had a really emotional day last week, and I met with a client, and I said, "I had a really emotional day today. I'm good, but I'm letting you know, so if you're noticing that my energy is down or there's something off about me, that's what it is, but I'm okay." If the
Mhm.
client asks me what happened, I will redirect back to them. But
Mhm.
especially with our highly sensitive clients, and if we've got wounding, we're really good about taking care of other people and not focusing on ourselves. That is not my job as a therapist to have my clients take care of me, but to name what's going on. I mean, I've seen threads about do I yawn or not yawn in session. I'm a yawner and I
Yes.
fidget and I let clients know before we even meet. Like I yawn, I fidget. And if I'm having a yawny day, I'll say, "How
Yeah.
is it for you that I'm wiggling around and yawning?" I've never had a client go, "It's
Yeah.
distracting." I mean, I think they
I'm so
appreciate the
curious about that.
authenticity.
Yeah. I'm so curious about that because I was taught, pretty rigidly not to yawn or like eat in session or things like that. And that one's tricky for me because honestly, for me, yawning would be really distracting for me. Or when I have had my own therapist yawn, I find it distracting. I find that um, yeah, they must be tired enough in this session that they're having a hard time even just showing up or doing the session or, um, I guess kind of stomaching their tiredness for the sake of me not feeling like I'm boring them, right? Which is a very strong association with someone yawning when you're talking to them.
Right, but did your therapist bring that into the room? Was there any explicit discussion about the yawning? Because what
Mm,
happens is you're my client, I yawn, I don't say anything about it, you're processing it, and we move on, and that's not creating safety.
mhm. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point, right? Commenting on it, making it explicit or, um I mean, along those lines, even note taking, for instance, can be a point of, especially on Zoom, right? It's like,
Mhm.
what's my therapist doing? They keep looking over here. They,
Mhm.
they keep like fidgeting with something. Um, and so just being really explicit that, what you just said was really important. I want to make sure I get it down on my notepad, right? That I have right here, right?
Right.
Um, because they have all sorts of hypotheses about what you're doing or what you think about them. Clients want desperately to know, what does my therapist really think about me? Right? And so we have to pay attention to those details. And I would say even more so on Zoom when little things like that are very, uh, easily, misinterpreted potentially. We're dealing with just less information, so to speak, when we're on Zoom.
Right. Well, I tell all my clients before we meet and at the first session, I will misattune to you. It's just a given. I'm human. So when that happens, will you be able to let me know in the moment? And if not, if you leave a situation, I often leave something, I go like, what the heck just happened? I'm like, shoot me an email and say, hey, something happened in session and I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Having ruptures and misattunement can really strengthen the therapeutic relationship. It's our job as therapists to create safety for that and to say, I may make a mistake. We're going to do this dance of when you first meet with someone. Do you need me to listen more? Do you need me to talk more? Those are really
Yeah.
okay things. And if we don't bring it up, we don't create safety for our clients.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. I want to go back to something that you had said about when you had made this post in particular, basically saying in so many words, um, I am very real with my clients, right? You even used the yawning example in your post, but you also said you saw a client or a colleague post in another Facebook group for therapists about something she was thinking about doing, and basically was met with quite a bit of judgment from other therapists. And this is something I keep finding myself talking about quite a bit, and I see a lot of therapists getting shamed publicly in Facebook groups or people very quick to point the finger and therapists going into Facebook groups trying to get help, right? Or think, oh, wow, hey, there's 4,000 therapists in this group. Maybe they could help me with this tricky question or this nuanced, clinical question, right? And then it often doesn't go that way, right? So what are your thoughts on that and on just, yeah, therapists interacting online?
It can be really scary. And in this instant, I did not respond in the group. This was a group that I really thought was a safe place. And when I saw all the
Hmm.
rigid responses, it really it was a little disappointing to me, and I reached out
Yeah.
to the person that posted privately and said, "Hey, here's my thought," and we talked about it offline, which is what spurred me to write the post that I did.
Yeah.
I don't find a lot of the Facebook groups to be really safe places, and it goes back to that thing of there are rules to keep clients safe. If we don't have the maturity and the wisdom and the ability to put the relationship to consider the relationship and the client's needs with whatever the rule is, we are just rule followers. And rules do not work for everybody in every situation. And we are having human relationships with other humans, and we need to have the skill and the ability to figure out how to meet the client's needs relationally and not with rules.
Hmm.
And that's where I see things breaking down in Facebook groups.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because as therapists, um, we're in a sense playing a role for our clients in that we are being who they need us to be today, right? Or in that session. Sometimes that might be very soft and empathic. Sometimes it's a little more active or a little more challenging of your clients. Um, we're good at doing that, right? When it's like, I'm in the chair and clearly that's my job. My job is to be empathic to this person. And then 10 minutes later, a therapist may hop on Facebook and like that's all out the window, right? And it's judgment, it's criticism, it's your fee is what? You're charging how much, right? Like I just think it's yeah, it's ironic that that is the case. And I think maybe also just a lot of pent up feelings, stress, burnout, COVID, Zoom therapy, all this stuff kind of rolled into one, and the anonymity of it, of course, just like teenagers bullying, online. There's just like, hey, I could say this thing and get out a little bit of my anger and hey, no real consequence. I'm probably never going to meet this person in this Facebook
Which
group, right?
which is why it's so important for us to do our own work to be able to sit in the gray. We wanna go to the it's this or that, the either or as opposed to both and. It takes tremendous maturity to be able to sit in that gray area and to sit with the discomfort and to know that just because this is what the rule is may not be what's best for the situation. I'm not talking about anything unethical or egregious. I wanna be very clear about that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's harder for our brains. It takes a little more work for our brains to to sit with the gray, right? Our brains are kind of designed to make things black and white so we can understand it easily and put it in a category, right? And that becomes applied to one another, right? Or to again a therapist saying, "Hey, can I get some advice on this?" And therapist either saying, "Hey, it's right or wrong," right? It's like let me pick a side real quick, even though sides didn't need to be created.
But don't we ask our clients to sit in that gray area and to sit with discomfort? We wanna
Mm,
increase their
yeah, for
distress
sure.
tolerance. Why aren't we doing it? I mean, I'm not saying everybody's not. I don't
Yeah,
I there there definitely is a part of me that's incredibly judgy about what I see in therapy groups. I wanna name that.
yeah,
So if you feel that coming out sideways, I'm really trying to keep it a tap on it, but it's there.
yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Going back to the Zoom thing, I'm really curious. Like in your work, both with your clients and also just in your being a therapist, among therapists and a coach, what's it been like for you to work on Zoom? What do you see in terms of therapists doing this work, clients? Yeah, any thoughts on that piece?
I was 90% online before the pandemic, and I loved being online. It's been brutal during the pandemic, which makes no sense, but I think because for me, this year has been about so much incredible loss and
Mm,
loss of social time and connection, and how much I feel empowered when I'm driving around in my car and I listen to podcasts. And I don't want to listen to podcasts if I'm sitting at home. So it's been very unbalanced because it would make sense. Like I worked from home and I was online before the pandemic. It's been really hard. I don't want, I have a monthly training, one or two trainings a month online. It is so hard for me to stay focused. I haven't been able to read a book for a year because it's hard.
yeah,
This is trauma. This is ongoing trauma we're experiencing. We may not all be traumatized. It's been brutal.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I even feel that kind of validating to hear, right? That kind of permission to acknowledge how hard it's been. Well, here's an interesting question for you. I often hear clients, especially lately, and especially because of having abundant access to the internet, clients that will be doing really good work in session. And it's like, I've got this suffering, or I lost this person in my life. And then they immediately go, but I know people have it way worse. And people, because of COVID, lost their jobs or lost two people. I only lost one person. They lost two people, right? There's this almost like suffering Olympics of sorts. And discounting my own suffering because there's always someone out there who has it worse than me. And I find that very unhelpful for clients that they can't just acknowledge their suffering as relative to them and what they have, right? Or, yeah, I'm suffering. I lost someone, but, I got a job and a 401k. It's like, what?
Well,
Yeah.
I think this is about our culture's inability to allow us to have our feelings, because if somebody dies, would somebody say, "Well, they were old." Like nobody can come
Yeah,
in and allow you
absolutely.
to sit
Yeah.
with your grief. And so Brené
Hmm.
Brown did an episode on comparative suffering on her podcast, Unlocking Us. It's very powerful. I interviewed Justine Folker early on in my podcast, and something that she said profoundly impacted how I show up as a therapist. She talks about the power of both and, yes, there are these losses. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's significant. We need to create room for that. and where do we have control? But it's not minimizing, and we tend to do this thing where we compare all the time and minimize our loss, and we have got to hold space for that. Otherwise, we're just doing cognitive behavior. It'll be better. It'll all get shiny and happy. If we don't allow space for those things that are hard, we cannot move forward and heal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well said, right? And giving that client some of that language to see the both and in it, right? And to refocus in on their actual loss or suffering, because that's why they're here. Like that's why we're meeting today. So, in session.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Our culture is not real comfortable with feelings, especially intense feelings, and we label
Mhm.
feelings as positive or negative. They're just energy. It's stuff that moves through us. We need to have a voice for all of those uncomfortable I went through something a week ago and I was talking with somebody about it. There are young parts of me in this situation, like I want the other people to suffer and I want them to hurt as much as I do. And I want them to, I hope that they're, like it's okay for me to have that voice inside. Do I tell
Yeah.
that to anybody? Do I bring it back to the situation? No. But those parts that feel angry and young, those need to have a place to be heard.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of putting it, for sure.
Yeah. And that allows me to show up and not act out and not have, stuff leak out sideways because I haven't allowed for those young. I mean, we all have that young angry. You're not the boss of me. You can't make me. Right?
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, I got a few of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. We all do. We all do. We've got a rebellious toddler and teenager.
Yeah. Yeah, little parts work. Um,
Mhm.
probably good for all of us.
Yeah.
So I'm curious more about also your business, right? And you have a few things going on between therapy, you have coaching, you have a podcast that sounds um, really wonderful and probably a really impactful way for you to spread spread the word and kind of accomplish your own mission. Um, what does it mean to be a highly sensitive person and a business owner, right? Or to what effect do feelings influence, let's say business decisions or kind of plans that you have?
It's a fine balance. I love being an entrepreneur. I love being able to set my own schedule, decide who I work with. In those respects, it's ideal for me. And I get overwhelmed. And with the pandemic, I've had to make choices about what I have to let go of and trying to figure out where that balance is. But I think that's true for all of us. And I tell myself I can do hard things. Anytime I do, even today, we were going to meet on another platform and I couldn't log in and I found myself getting nervous. The first half of the session, my heart was pounding. I'm like, I do this all the time. Like, why am I nervous? Learning how to know I can do hard things. I get nervous before new things, to just know that that's part of it and to learn how to manage is a really big part of it. Having great support is also really important, staying connected to my friends. Yeah.
Mm,
Did that answer your question?
I think so. I'm
Your face is really hard to read. I don't get a lot
Oh,
back from you, I
really?
got I gotta say.
I've never really been told that.
Oh,
That's interesting. Well, part of it is I'm kinda crunching the numbers and just thinking about where else we can go with this, and also,
yeah,
my goal, like, when I'm doing these interviews is in part to extract from you, like, your core kind of message, but also when I think about our therapists who will listen to this, they're wondering, how can I learn something from Patricia that will help me be successful in my business?
sure.
Because there's a lot of people out there who don't have a client yet or haven't made a dollar, right? Or just have two clients and they're wondering, like, you have really clearly found like a message, a niche, a voice, all these things. And so I'm wondering, like, yeah, for those people who don't have any of that, what would you tell them? Or like, um, yeah.
I think often our own wounding and our own healing leads us to the people that we work with. I think many of us are wounded healers, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what gives me strength and insight from my clients and empathy, and I don't have any shame around the wounding that I have. That's really what has informed what my ideal clients are, and I didn't know that. I started out seeing everybody and which were the clients that made me wanna poke my eyeballs out, and, then holding space for lots and lots of clients. I don't mean that disrespectfully, until I figured out what are the clients that I do my best work with, and it's a disservice for me to see clients that are not a good fit for me. Starting to tune into the
Mhm.
clients that you have energy with, and it may not even be the area of focus. It may be the type of clients that have more insight, clients that are really angry, clients that are very that may resonate with some therapists.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's some level of, uh, I guess some people feel some sense of guilt for not wanting to work with every kind of client, right? Because there's certainly some pressure in that, especially as you're starting out. That like, um, I remember when I was working at a clinic in graduate school, where it's like you just take whoever walks in the door, and hopefully you can figure it out, and hopefully they're, no one's talking about, is this a good fit for you? Is this your ideal client? Like that's not a phrase I heard for many years. Um, and then graduating, and then going into agency work, it's like you will just literally work with whoever is kind of next in line, even if it's a horrible fit for both of you. So, yeah.
But I think that's sometimes part of what we have to do. I worked home health. I worked in a hospital for 9 years.
Mhm.
I think it's helpful to know how to deal with all types of people, and when you get to a point in your practice where you can choose, then you get to choose, but we don't always all start out that way. Very few people start out knowing what they wanna specialize in.
Mhm. W At what point did it become clear to you what you wanted to specialize in?
Just a couple of years ago, honestly. I had a sense when I started private practice because I had a hospital background, I thought I could see everybody, and I had to file a Tarasoff on a client, and
Mhm.
it was very draining. The work that I was doing was very draining, and when I learned about the trait of being a highly sensitive person, I created this online course for people. I really want people to know there is nothing wrong with them, that we have amazing gifts and strengths to offer the world. Comes with challenges too. So that mission became very clear to me, and then things started to fall into place. It has not been easy. Things did not come together as quickly as I expected,
Mhm.
which is kind of part of how it is. You gotta be in it for the long haul.
Mhm. And was there a point at which you thought, "Man, maybe this niche won't work, or maybe this niche is, yeah, not gonna kinda land with people?"
With the groups I did, HSPs are a really hard sell, and I'm one of them. I mean, I will, rumble with a decision, and should I, when I bought the podcasting course, I called my husband crying, saying, "I just spent a lot of money on a podcasting course, and what if I don't do it? And what if I fail? Is that okay?" And he's like,
Mhm.
"It's fine." And so I think this pull to make the perfect decision, and I ran the courses for a while, and then I kind of stopped advertising them because it was so much work to try and
Yeah.
convince people that it was something helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think we go through cycles where we question, we wonder. I think that's just part of it. My whole process has not been exciting uphill all the time. There are times when I'm
Yeah.
burned out, I'm tired, I don't like what I'm doing. I figure out what I need
Yeah.
to do. And just know, just kind of hang in there. I think again, like we
Mhm.
think we find out what we want to do and it's going to be joyful and blissful and energizing all the time. Like that's not been my experience.
Mm. That's
We suit
fair.
up and show up. I mean, if it were draining me and I hated it, then obviously I'd stop. But I go through periods where it's like, this is just really hard and I'm not enjoying it.
Fair
I mean,
enough.
how about you?
Um, in terms of which part?
I don't know, therapy, your podcast, do you always love it? Do you always feel 100% motivated?
Definitely not. I talk about modes in business, with the therapist that I coach. Some of the modes that I talk about are, there's startup mode when you're just starting something new, whether it's a practice or just a part of your business, like a course or a podcast, and you're going to be very in it, very energized, very connected to the whole thing. There's kind of growth mode where you're still pushing, pushing, pushing. There's maintenance, which is a mode that I went into a lot this year. I moved. I had an international move in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. I had my first child. Everything was turned upside down, and so that means everything's going into maintenance mode. Meaning, I end up doing the least that I need to do to keep the ball rolling, to keep income happening, right, and to just be okay. And so that might look like a 4-hour workday. That might look like, just a couple clients, or just seeing the clients I have and not taking on anyone new, not starting any new courses or programs or anything crazy. Um, and letting that be okay. And the irony is every time I've done that, nothing bad has ever happened. My business never plummets. Sometimes I make even more money when I step back and let it breathe. Or I have good ideas sometimes when I'm in maintenance mode and I'm just resting, you
Mhm.
know, um, but that the burnout mode is real, right? When people are pushing too hard for too long, um, for whatever reason, right? And I think therapists need to be very, very careful with that right now. I think it's a real threat to many of us, and I think the demand on therapists is not going anywhere. I think it's only going to keep
Mm.
increasing. It's not like COVID's going to be over, quote unquote. I hear people say that, and then it's going to be like a light switch, and we're all we're all okay again. I just think this has taken a toll on therapists, and therapists, a vacation's good, but then you come back, 6 days after vacation, you're like, bam, I'm right back into what I needed a break from, so
Yeah.
I think self-care, I put in quotations because that word has lost meaning for most therapists, has to be reimagined, has to be rethought. I think a lot of it has to do with how you structure your business, your time, your money, how you think about your clients, or how you think about, how much you kind of owe your clients. So I just think we need to keep thinking about these things because we're right in the thick of it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm convinced that research is gonna show how much we've been impacted by COVID over the next couple of years. I mean, I've changed in ways that I don't feel very good about. There are things about COVID
Mhm.
that I think have been very helpful, and with all the losses and the hypervigilance around safety and,
Yeah.
it's changed me, and I've shown up in a way that I'm not super real happy with.
I can understand that entirely. Um, I think it's a culmination of things. I think the stress of it, I think the isolation, I think being on a screen for 9 hours a day is not normal. Um, I was in this predicament not long ago where a client who in my clinical opinion, really, really, really needs to see a friend, even if it's in a park, 6 feet with double masks or whatever.
Yeah,
Um, you know, and if the client is asking me like, "Is that okay? Do I have your permission to do that?" You know, if you ask me, it's like that is 100% medically necessary.
yeah,
If you ask a physician, they might say otherwise. They might say, "No, it's not worth the risk," right? Or here are the numbers, or right, you're putting yourself at risk. Um, so I agree about the research piece. I agree about the ripples that I'm seeing in terms of people who are more isolated, more depressed, more anxious. I'm seeing OCD pop out of nowhere. I'm seeing new addictions, domestic abuse. I mean, it's just been gnarly, to
yeah,
be honest, in
yeah.
terms of some of the themes in my clinical work.
And we've had to make decisions that we come up with what we think is an appropriate protocol. And then when mental
Yeah,
health comes into play, then we have to make a choice of, do we want to be safe or do we want to have mental health issues?
totally.
And again, this is the gray area. And I had to go through this with my kids who live out of town about, do they come home and visit and what's good for my
Yeah.
mental health? And do we let them stay here? Or do we not let them? Do we wear masks in the house? It's been
Mhm.
an evolving process, and we've had some really uncomfortable conversations. And I'll tell you, I've shed so many tears over this. And it was hard for my kids. We just have
Yeah.
to rumble with the messiness of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. We want there to be a clear rule, and again, it's just like that client asking me, he wants it to be a yes or no kind of thing, but it's a both and. It's a both, yes, it would be good for you to see a friend, and there's some things to think about for you and your partner and your risk profile and all this stuff. I mean, it's been tremendous. This whole thing has been tremendous.
Yeah.
We do have a question here. And for those of you who are watching live on YouTube here, feel free to ask a couple more questions. We got a few more minutes here with Patricia. Um, so 770 Thinker is asking, he or she says, thanks for acknowledging those just starting out. This topic of ideal client is not something I've addressed before on YouTube. So not really a question, but more of a remark. Um, it's interesting, right? I mean, ideal client isn't a phrase that I heard in graduate school, come to think of it. What do you think about that term? Like, what does that mean to you?
I guess I'd wanna know if this person is practicing at all.
Yeah.
And so you just start paying attention to your energy level before and after you have clients, and what is it about those clients that you really enjoy? And like I said, it may not be what they're presenting with. It may be that they process deeply or they have deep feelings, or if, like I said, you like people that, you like working with people that are angry or struggling with those types of things, that you pay attention to what your energy level is and your enthusiasm level is to start getting a sense of what that might be. Or what things are you fascinated with? Are there certain diagnoses, or you watch movies and there's certain profile types that just fascinate you that you want to know about? That those may be your people.
Totally.
What do you think, John?
I was thinking back to again when I was a graduate student, and I guess, even if you're in graduate school and you're working in a clinic, you look at your calendar, and professors don't want you to admit this, but you look at your calendar and you go, "Oh, that's going to be a good. I can't wait for that client. That's going to be a good session." Right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
I look forward to seeing them, and I have to, for myself, I think, why is that, right? There's certainly some chemistry in terms of just being able to get along well, to help them. Maybe as a therapist, I felt helpful right away. Maybe the client came in and gave me a lot to work with, or was really open to me in that first session, and I was able to really help them. Because certainly I know part of it, the work for me is when I feel effective, that feels like an ideal client. Like, this is someone that's a good fit for me to help, in terms of both our personalities fitting and also my style, and them being open to me jumping in and helping. I don't do great when clients come in for weeks or months and months and months, don't really let me in, or
Mhm.
don't get better or don't try things I've suggested. That's hard for me. Um, yeah, so I think you could think about it that way in terms of when you feel most helpful, most effective. Um, yeah,
Yeah. I think it also has to do with what your strengths are. Like, I'm really good at holding space for people. And I was thinking about a client that I think this year in May will be 4 years we've been working together. This client took a long time to let me in because of all the
yeah,
trauma that they have. And for some
yeah.
reason, there was enough material to work with when I started that we have this it's a really lovely relationship because the client has done the work and is really stuck with it.
Yeah, totally.
And the things that I can say now and reflect to this client, there's no way I could have said those things in the first year or 2 because they just weren't ready to hear it.
I think that's powerful. I think that long-term work is kind of, for many therapists, kind of what dreams are made of, right? To see a
Yeah,
client through a real chunk of their life, right? Through losses and marriages, and kids and divorces, and all sorts of stuff. And there's the parallel process too of, as a therapist in your own life, you're having your own milestones, your own moments, your own things that are happening, right? And some of which maybe the client is privy to, some maybe not. But yeah, I've had some clients now for, yes, 7, 8 years or so, and that's really powerful stuff. Yeah, and there's just a
it
ease
is.
about it. Yeah.
And we may be the first person that a client meets with, and so we're just creating safety for them. And again, you get to decide who you wanna work with, but
Hmm.
we just may be creating that safe space and somebody's not ready to do depth work. They just wanna know that somebody can show up for them and is not gonna reject them or judge them or criticize them. And I hear sometimes therapists say, "We're not making progress, but the client's getting something out of it."
This is a huge lesson for me and my ego over the years of going back to the ideal client wanting to feel effective. That was the younger, more ambitious therapist in me wanting to show my tricks and measuring my success to my clients getting better, right? Or getting better fast. Um, the longer I do this, the more I realize for many clients, especially those that keep showing up, even when things are going really well in their life, they are in part coming because they want someone to bear witness to their life, both their suffering and their highs, right? And those joyful moments. They also just want someone to attune to them, to pay attention to them, to let them know that you're okay, you're doing good. I'm here for you. You're doing good. That's extremely powerful, right? And there's nothing flashy about that in terms of, technique or being super active in the session, whatever it is. And um it's just those core components of the therapeutic relationship, or the kind of Rogerian elements are very, very potent, but oftentimes for new therapists, it doesn't feel like enough, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's okay to check in with clients to see how they're doing. Again, that's how we create safety. In one of my groups last week, it's easy for me to respond to the extroverts that are like me because that's what I resonate with. And sometimes people are more quiet. And we talked about this, and there's somebody in group that I just don't feel like I attune with. And so I asked for a reality check, and they're like, I get so much out of being here. And I'm like, really? I don't feel like I'm giving you that much time and attention.
Yeah.
That's why it's okay, and I have to be okay if the client and in another group, somebody said, "I feel like I share and you don't respond to me." I said, "I'm really sorry. Sometimes I do that, and I'm really sorry, and I'm so glad that you told me." I
Mhm.
have to be okay with that feedback and look at it.
Yeah, and that's a skill that comes with time, that ability to not take it personally, right? And to invite feedback from clients, and then internalize it and use it and make the work better as a result. Yalom is kind of famous for some of the work he did where, after a session, he and the client would both document what happened in session, right? Um, and there were often major discrepancies. I said this or I cried, and my therapist was cold, right? Or my therapist was judgmental, right? And he's saying, I was there, my client cried, I was warm, I leaned in, I was compassionate, just fascinating that the kind of the lived experiences of either party. Because in a large part, really good therapy is often emotionally charged, right? And also
Yeah.
there's a subjectivity to it as well. Hence the importance of processing, right? Or going back to how we started this interview today of inviting clients into that process, and constantly attuning to it and making sure that the process is part of the conversation.
Yeah. I think being able to talk about what's going on in the room is what we want to model to our clients. And during COVID, I've said to clients, like, I feel like I'm just not aligning, I'm just not attuning with you. How are you doing? And a client sent me an email afterwards saying that they really got a lot out of the session. And I just thought, I don't get it. And I have times that I
Yeah.
show up and I think, I don't know what I'm doing. Or a client says, I want to talk to you about something, and my heart drops. I'm like, oh no. Or I want to talk to you about something you said. And I'm like, oh no, what did I do? So, it's not like I show up to all my sessions like, "I love this, and I just have"
Yeah.
I gotta rumble with that stuff, and my insecurities come up. That's just part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that's wonderful. And I think, again, for the therapist listening, giving them real permission to be human. Um, Well, Patricia, this has been great. I just wanted to thank you for coming on, and also coming on without any prompts, and with the last minute curveball of, hey, let's live stream this thing on YouTube, which is very like me to
I didn't put on
do
any
that.
makeup.
You've been a great sport, and this is actually the first time we've live streamed it on YouTube, so it's been cool. And hopefully next time people will ask more questions and stuff. But
Sure.
thanks again for being here and to kind of lead us out. Please let us know how people can get in touch with you, and then of course we'll put links to your websites and your podcasts and stuff in the
Sure.
description.
The best thing is to go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. All my social media handles are there. I'm doing a lot of short videos on TikTok and Instagram. My online HSP course is launching first week in April. They're really powerful courses, and in COVID, with people feeling so isolated and wanting a sense of community of people that get you, I would highly recommend them. And I've done a ton of podcasts on with people that have taken the course. It's on my website, so you can find everything there.
Wonderful, easy enough. We'll put those links in there. And again, Patricia, thanks so much for doing this and being willing to just kind of explore with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
All right, bye-bye.